Good afternoon. Let me welcome you all to Harvard Law School. My name is Charles Ogletree. I'm the Jesse Kulinko Professor of Law here at Harvard. I'm the founder and the executive director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. You are now in what I call the Taj Mahal for students. It's commonly called Wasserstein Hall, and this is a brand new building that opened up a little bit more than a year ago. And it's completely dedicated to students for classes, seminars, events, places to eat, no faculty offices at all. It's 5 stories high, and there are 4 stories of parking below. I know there are a few Harvard alums, and I want to thank you very much for paying for this. You're making it possible. Because we're having a good time. And I said that before I say the most important thing, that every event that we host here at Harvard, the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, and one that we have this summer on Martha's Vineyard, they're all free and open to the public for the very reason that's what Houston would have done. The whole idea is that exposing people to different points of view makes an enormous amount of difference, and that's what we're trying to do. I'm going to say just a few words about the event tonight. First of all, we are very fortunate to have this event co-sponsored by some very noteworthy individuals here in this larger community. One is sitting in the front row, my dear friend and colleague, the director of the W.B. Du Bois Institute at Harvard, and a remarkable professor, lecturer, and entrepreneur. Please join me in welcoming Professor Henry Louis Gates, Jr. We're also, one of our co-sponsors is the Prison Studies Project, and I don't know if Kaya Stern is here. Kaya is a former staff person with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, and she's done an incredible amount of work to make this a success, and I wanted to thank her. And also, one of my former students, Gina Bond, I don't think she's here, but she was instrumental, as you'll hear more about, in making sure that we could create this film. And I have to say, you'll hear from them after we show the film. We have 2 of the young men who are part of the Central Park 5, and they have endeavored to come to Harvard Law School, and they'll be here for the panel discussion. And they have every reason to be disappointed in the American criminal justice system that treated them very badly for a very long time. But they're free, and they're now here, and you'll see them in this remarkable film. There are 2 people responsible for it, and Ken Burns would want me to first thank his daughter, who not only wrote a wonderful book, but has played an essential role in this. And she unfortunately can't be here, but Professor Gates and I have hosted a number of events with Ken Burns. He is really the consummate artist and producer who has an eye for capturing things that have addressed America, and that somehow, this is my view, not his view, have an underline that has a lot to do with race. Whether it's baseball, whether it's the Civil War, whether it's this film, the Central Park 5, it all has a tie-in to his great works that have some significance in terms of what's happened with race in America in earlier centuries and what continues to happen. And did a phenomenal film as well. That we showed and screened with Skip several years ago, the Jack Johnson documentary, which was really amazing. And he is going to be speaking during the discussion we're going to have. This is a 2-hour film, so that's why we gave you some munchies to enjoy. This is at the movies. The lights are going to go down. You're going to be able to watch it. And then we're going to have a brisk discussion about what the film's about. And since this room is already full, we're going to actually start early. Some people will come in at 6 o'clock. Sorry for them. But we're going to start early. But before we started, I wanted to at least have our producer and director and a friend of Harvard and really a friend of public television come and say a word, if he would. I hope you will join me in welcoming to the stage, to this microphone, Ken Burns.
Thank you, Tree. We're very excited to be here. I would advise you, of course, to turn off your smartphones, particularly at Harvard University. I understand that can be risky to have a email going on. Got to be careful about these things. We're honored, and it's really three people who made this film. My daughter Sarah, who first became, I guess the word is obsessed with this story. I had been familiar with it, but had not, it had taken Sarah's awakening before I got involved. And her husband, my son-in-law, David McMAHON, the three of us are the co-directors, the co-producers, and the co-writers of this. So if you don't like anything, we're entirely to blame. And since the two of them are not here, it looks like I'm entirely to blame. But Tree is right. I've been interested in American history all of my professional life as a filmmaker, not as a historian, but I have been drawn to a kind of honest, complicated version of the past. And with the exception of only 2 or 3 films that I can think of that I've worked on out of the 26, 27 that we've made for public broadcasting over the last 35 years, only 2 or 3 don't deal in some large way with race. And it's not because we go looking for it, it's because it's there in American life. We know when we were founded, we know what our creed was, the second sentence of the Declaration, that says we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. But it's sort of funny that the guy who wrote that owned more than 100 human beings when he wrote it, and he didn't see the contradiction. And so we have an American narrative that is constantly trying to attend to a question of race at all times. I mean, our greatest event, the Civil War, wouldn't have happened without that. I mean, the only art form we've created, jazz, is born in a community that had the peculiar experience of being unfree in a free land. So wherever you go, it's the thing that we need to deal with always. And I don't need to tell my friends and distinguished colleagues here or any of you in this audience about the centrality of race in American life today, yesterday, and tomorrow. So this film, my daughter was an undergraduate at a small college in New Haven, Connecticut. And she, between her junior and senior year, ended up as an unpaid intern at a law firm, a civil rights law firm in New York City that was preparing a civil suit against the city of New York for the wrongful conviction and imprisonment of the so-called Central Park Five. She was fascinated with the case, obsessed with it, wrote her final paper her senior year on the representations of race in the media coverage of it, and then went to work for this law firm as a paralegal after college. Didn't want to be a lawyer, left that, but the case continued to haunt her, and she eventually decided to write a book. As she was writing that book, her husband David and I had the great privilege of sort of watching the first pages come out, and looked at each other and said, my goodness, this is an extraordinary film as well, and in a way not to duplicate the book, but to actually do something different. So we started on parallel tracks a little bit behind her. Her book was published in the spring of 2011. We finished in the spring of 2012, and we started with the Cannes Film Festival last May and thought, well, we'll just go to a couple film festivals and that'll be it. And we're now playing in 110 cities, venues, and it will be broadcast. Thank you. It will be broadcast on April 16th. So after you weep for your taxes, you can weep for this story the next night if you want to see it again or want to tell folks about it. But I'm thrilled that we have an opportunity here. Sarah liked to say that when she learned about this story, as someone too young to remember the actual events of April 19th, 1989, she was outraged. And she still feels outraged. And I think that we joined her in her outrage, and we still feel outraged. And it's impossible, as everyone does before a film, to say, I hope you enjoy it, because you will not enjoy it. I hope you too share and absorb our outrage. One thing that will help, which I'm very pleased to say, is that we will have 2 of the 5, Raymond Santana and Kevin Richardson, who will be here afterwards to join in the question. And you will find them 2 human beings who will be able to absorb a lot of that outrage and perhaps channel it into something positive and productive and forward moving. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you skipping your dinner hour to watch the film, and I look forward to the conversation afterwards. Thank you. Could I introduce Kevin Richardson and Raymond Santana?
Thank you all for recognizing these extraordinary individuals, and Ken and his daughter and son-in-law for making really a classic film that will be with us for a very, very long time. We're going to take some questions from the audience, and I should announce those in 3018, please come downstairs if you want to ask a question so we can see you, those in the overflow room. I know the seats are gone, but you can feel around the walls. There's a microphone to the left and a microphone to the right, halfway down the stage. It might make sense for folks to get in line now. And this is going to be a 40-minute or so dialogue with our guest tonight. I'm going to start with Ken to just say a little bit why his daughter and son-in-law made the film, and what does he think its arc is? What is it supposed to do? Ken?
Well, I think we set out to try to answer two questions. How could something like this happen? And who were these five? That is to say, if you were the Central Park Five in 1989, you were the worst human beings on Earth. And somehow, as people forgot it, by the time of their exoneration, they became something in limbo. Most people thought they got off on a technicality if they knew that at all. And for the last 10 years, as the city has outrageously delayed this is a great city. This is a great progressive city that has behaved using the language of the Jim Crow South now, a century before, to prolong this trial, to keep things going. And the second question was, who are they? Who are these five people? Because they had their humanity taken away, and we've tried to, in the film, sort of ask that question in every breath. Who are we? At the same time, as we were talking earlier, it's the most rigorously journalistic film we've ever made. It's relatively contemporary. There's no narration, deliberately to devoid ourselves and the film of any kind of colorful language. The few adjectives are all related to the brutal rape of Tricia Miley and her extraordinary recovery. Everything is just the facts. And though the cops and the prosecutors hid behind the skirts of the civil suit and did not respond to our repeated, every 6 months I would call them to ask to comment for our film will be better if you're in it. They refused, knowing full well they could not answer any of the basic questions we would have to ask them, and hid instead behind the skirts of that thing. But we nonetheless tried our best to represent their side in this. So, you know, we yield to the extraordinary humanity of these five men, and who we've gotten to know is the great privilege of our life. But we also know that film is a powerful tool, and we hope that in some ways, whatever happens with this film, and there'll be a national PBS broadcast on the 16th, that we might have an ability to affect something, or at least exert the kind of pressure on the city so that somebody wakes up and says, remind me again why we're protecting people who screwed up 24 years ago, and that they can move towards settlement. We have no vested interest in what that settlement is. We only know that it is good for the five, it is good for their families, it's actually good for the prosecutors and police in a kind of truth and reconciliation way, and it's good for the city of New York and the citizens of this world if you put a period at the end of this run-on sentence and say, oh, no mas, it's over, let's put it behind us and go forward, rather than in the suspended animation that they are still forced to live their lives in.
And let me just say this in terms of Raymond and Kevin, who represent two of the five who are here tonight. I know that the city of New York, the prosecutors, the police have yet to say they apologize for what happened. I apologize for this happening in America to both of you and the other three as well. It just is indefensible. There are a lot of questions that will be asked. I'm going to ask you first. Everyone's going to ask, how do you feel? But what's the reaction to 1989 and now it's 2013? What's your reaction? First start with Raymond and Kevin.
First off, I just want to thank everybody for having us out. It's an honor to be here today. It's an honor to sit here in front of you and try to put our lives back together. You know, we have so much emotion when it comes to those questions, you know, because there's, you know, Reyes didn't have to come forward. He could have kept this story to himself, and we would have still been registered sex offenders. We probably wouldn't have had no jobs. My daughter probably wouldn't have been born. I probably would have still been tangled up somewhere in the system. But it's just about being grateful, you know, being grateful, given the opportunity, given a chance, you know, to try and pick up the pieces and to move forward and to put our lives back together, even though we still have to walk on eggshells and you know, we still have to deal with this litigation that's been pending for 10 years and nobody wants to take responsibility for what happened to us. And at the end of the day, we just have to be grateful that we're here, you know, to be in front of you and to receive the response that you guys gave us, you know, today. And the other screen is because it becomes part of our healing process. You know, it's so awesome when we come in front of you and the love that you give us. You know, because back in 1989, like Ken said, we was considered the worst. And now, you know, to be given that opportunity to come before you and get the hugs and to feel the love, it's like that beginning of that indelible scar, that deep scar is that beginning of the healing for us.
It's interesting, Kevin, I want you to respond as well, that even after you were exonerated and released, the press was still saying the guilty five. It didn't end. Kevin, what's your sense about having to live this now, more than almost 24 years after it happened?
First of all, hello, everyone. You know, it's extremely difficult to still go through this after it's plain to see that we're innocent, and evidence shows that. But it goes to show you that when Jim Jawaya says that people are still stuck in a lie, they're still stuck in a mistake. And I had a deposition last week that I did, and I actually told the people that was interviewing me, I told them, I don't know how can you sleep at night knowing that you took or attempted to take people's lives away. A lot of our family members passed away from this. And I just asked them that question. They couldn't answer that. And, you know, we're still dealing with this now. One thing, by us being here speaking to you is extremely therapeutic for us. Because in '89, we didn't have a voice. We were too scared to speak because we thought the world was against us. You know, so to be here now in front of you and people to see us and to see that we're human beings. We have families, we have kids, we're just trying to move on in society. So for this just to still be going on now, it goes to show you people's character, you know. And another thing is people wonder why they ask us, are we bitter? We're not bitter because we believe that bitterness will take you to the grave. What we do now, like we were doing at this point, is reversing that and speaking with intellect and showing you that we're not animals because they want us to go the other way. So I just wanted to tell you that we are extremely thankful to be here.
Thank you very much. There are microphones on both sides of the room, and to ask folks to come forward and ask their questions and try to be as precise and as brief, as Skip would say, as you can in your question. First question?
Well, this is all
It's
very,
on.
This is very overwhelmingly moving, and it's just wonderful to have you two here. And it says something about the power of the film as a medium, because if I'd read this in a newspaper, even though I'm a reasonably smart guy, I'm not sure I'd feel the same way about it as you do, seeing it on a film and seeing you appear there. So it's incredible. I have just one question. I think of Mayor Bloomberg as being a very fair-minded, very smart person, and if he gives a shit so much about a 17-inch sugary soft drink, I would think that he would look, if he saw this film, he would be absolutely outraged. And has he seen it?
We've tried to get it to him. We don't believe that he's seen it. We offered it to Ed Koch, who said, I know how to go to the theater. And somebody said, Ed Koch just saw the film. Weren't you at one of the screenings?
Yeah. Yes.
And Ed Koch was there. And then he wrote a review, which was essentially positive, but still said, I don't think the cops did anything wrong. Said it was a great film, everybody should look at it, but the cops didn't do anything wrong. I agree with you. Bloomberg's a manager. This is an incredible drain. The comptroller of the city of New York has already spoken out in a press conference saying, why are we spending money for 10 years prosecuting something, delaying something and continuing to deny justice to them? And most recently, the city council passed a non-binding resolution saying, let's put this past, let's settle this. And the Corporation Council steadfastly refuses to, has been obstinate, and has been fighting with their own fellow, city workers over this. I don't know whether it's the din has reached up to Bloomberg, but one would hope that he would be reasonable enough to see this.
I think your film will create that din.
Let's hope so.
Any other reactions?
Really quick. Bloomberg wasn't in the office back then, and so wasn't Commissioner Kelly, and that's one thing that we struggle to understand. Why is it that if you're not in the office, I mean, it's not it doesn't take away anything from you to acknowledge that somebody did something wrong, and it makes you even look more heroic in the eyes of the people to say, you know what, I'm gonna step up and I'm gonna be the leader and I'm gonna make sure that we correct this wrong. And so that's one thing that we struggle with, to come across numerous senators and councilmen, and we receive proclamations from the city from the council members and also from the state senate, and to still sit here and be fighting this legal battle 10 years later is mind-boggling.
Another question? Another question from the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Susie. I'm also struggling with being overwhelmed. At some point during the film, I realized that I was 15 in 1989, also in New York, but in a very different place, on Long Island, and with quite a bit of privilege. But my question doesn't have to do with my being overwhelmed, but it just is an excuse for the reason that my voice is shaky. I'd like to know just basically if you could tell me more about the civil suit, so exactly, what the nature of the suit is, where the suit is right now, what you're able to share, and also if there's any kind of public support campaign that's following the suit.
Well, basically the civil suit right now is, we're still in discovery. We're still doing depositions. They have conducted over 50 depositions, and they still have some ways to go. But what happens is that the city tends to use these stall tactics against us. We was just recently, they was debating on the disc. We was trying to get the files from the police officers, and it took about 3 months of them to debate on how they can transfer that information to up-to-date disc and how much was the cost, and that took about 3 months to debate that. So it's stuff like that we came across. There's also the waivers. They send you this stack of waivers and they ask you to sign off to look into your history. And so for us, it was prison records, it was school records, Facebook, Twitter. Anytime we went to the doctor, for our family members, for my dad, they went back 25 years and they looked at, has he ever been on disability? Has he ever took workman's comp? How many doctors has he seen in the last 25 years? And he had to sign off on waivers to get all those records, stuff that has no bearing on the case. But this is just part of the stall tactic. And then, the recent one was when they subpoenaed Ken, Sarah, and Dave for the outtakes of the film. And that's stuff we had to deal with all this time.
We just spent $100,000 in legal fees fighting that subpoena, which we got quashed by a federal magistrate who severely rebuked the Corporation Council for their arguments. The city has now come back and sort of appealed, dropping all of those arguments and now trying a whole new set of them. And the idea is to wear us down, and I'm in the strange position of having to start a legal defense fund because we refuse to give up our notes and outtakes on this film. And so when you ask about what can be done, since you're not in New York right now, I assume, people have been coming out to the various hearings, and you can find that on the Facebook pages and the site. There's a Central Park 5 website and Facebook page, and each of the individual 5 have their own Facebook page. You can find out particular dates if you happen to be in the city. But referring to the last question, you can write the mayor of the city of New York an old-fashioned snail mail, and all of a sudden there will be a critical mass. There will be a critical mass. You know, the President of the United States is going to look at this film shortly, asked to see it. And so, you know, I'm not sure that pressure can be exerted, but I think at some point a critical mass of people seeing that the emperor has no clothes, finally protecting these detectives, many of whom have retired, some are still in the force, protecting these officers, same thing, protecting these prosecutors, same thing. It's a fool's errand. It's a fool's errand, and they've delayed too long. This is outrageous when detectives who are supposed to keep their records suddenly can't find them, but they expect Raymond's dad to have his 25 years of stuff. Otherwise, this is 10 years old. 10 years old. It's outrageous.
Ken, you also
Thank
said
you.
there's a lot of things that the police could have done and didn't do if they were really looking for the person responsible.
Well, I'm not sure. This is a very dense film, and it does sort of kick you in the gut. It's so hard to take, which is why you don't say, as everyone hopes that you'll enjoy their film, and we don't hope you enjoy this film. I don't know what kind of person you would be. It's a bizarre film in which the only person who has a conscience is a psychopathic a rapist who decides to confess and apologize, and otherwise these guys would be in there. It's so hard to fathom the exact extent of what's going on with them and their lives, and with us now having done this film. And I'm sorry, I forgot the meat of your question.
Just trying to figure out from your point of view why this was so important. What do you see as some of the errors that they made in the case?
Well, I mean, there's the biggest thing is, if you notice in the film, the attack of Tricia Miley occurs on April 19th. But you notice later on, about halfway through the film, you meet Mateus Reyes, and you find out that on April 17th, 2 days before, he assaulted a woman. They were interrupted. She got away, was able to give a description. He had a cut on his cheek. The young detective did some work with the hospitals and identified him, and they didn't do anything. Linda Fairstein very quickly closed that case. The woman who was assaulted moved to the West Coast. And we think that in some ways, and the New York Times is now pursuing a Freedom of Information Act request from the city for more information about documents that have just disappeared about this case, about that earlier case, that a lot of this is in reaction to that screw-up. So that they're more willing to sacrifice human lives to cover up the cover-up than they are to exactly let the light of day in. So it's very interesting. At the time of the reinvestigation, evidence from April 17th mysteriously disappeared and reappeared after Morgenthau's commissioned report by 2 other independent prosecutors came forward. And so I think there's enough that stinks in that we're ready to dive back in and say, let's make another film about what happened on April 17th, see if we can find this woman, and maybe at some point they'll realize that this thing is, it's like a Watergate. So that's that. The first mistake is they had him, right? And they didn't get him. Right? Second mistake is, after you spend 30 hours with a 14-year-old and he finally has got a story and it contradicts all the other stories and they're internal contradictions, wouldn't you, at least as a professional, entertain another theory? You could still believe these guys are wrong, but you would, out of professionalism, pursue alternative theories. When the DNA comes back and there's no match, this is a bloody, bloody crime scene. They catch Raymond and Kevin that night. They don't have any time to change their clothes. Is there blood on them? Not a bit. Nothing of the crime scene on them, nothing of them on the crime scene. No DNA match. Inconsistencies in the confession. Bad legal representation. They're desperate to solve this. They know they've made a mistake. The train's left the station, and the truth, they all realize. You know what? Film, somebody was talking about the power of film earlier, the first question. Film has a kind of polygraphic force to it, You've met these 5 people. You know who they are now. as we know who they are. But you also know the police and prosecutors. They may not have given us that, but you see Elizabeth Lederer's face when she won? How happy does she look? She looks miserable. I think I need a vacation. I think I'm going to give it to her, Robert Morgenthau says. You know, she looks miserable. She knows. She's still a prosecutor. Fairstein retired and is a celebrated crime novelist. She did the Preppy murder case in this and on the basis of this. But when you heard the story of Michael Armstrong, who was hired by the police to reinvestigate and found that the police hired somebody who found that the police did nothing wrong, except let the guy go, her husband worked in the law firm of the guy who did the investigation. And Morgenthau has broken with her, and her husband has since passed away. I mean, it's a very, very complicated Shakespearean house, that's going on there. And so she's out there telling us that she won't talk to us, but goes on to Fox and says, we don't have all the facts. This is before we're done with our film. And all we wanted to say was, if we don't have the facts, please tell us what the facts are, Linda. But she couldn't do that because, as I said before, she couldn't answer one question that we would ask her.
I just wanted to state, basically, they never expected the truth to come out. They expected us to still be in prison right now. And when it did, they don't know what to do. They're trying to hide behind their mistakes, but it's out now. And we must do everything possible, like we're doing now. We're using this as a platform to raise awareness to people, so it won't be another Century Park 5. It won't be, another Scottsboro Boys. It won't be other things happening. So we're using this as a platform to get this out. I just wanted to state that.
Let me ask you about the community that maybe heard on television or read a newspaper who still think that something happened, still think you're involved. What's your reaction to that, and how do you respond to folks who still don't get the fact that you guys didn't commit the crimes?
I mean, since the film has came out, that number has reduced drastically. I mean, I came from a big family, 5 uncles on one side, 3 on another, and they all thought I was guilty. And at the end of the day, the only person I had in my corner was my father. But we understand time heals all wounds, and I always use this as my example because they came forward and they apologized, and like Kev said, to stay bitter will take you to the grave. It will eat you from the inside out, and I accept the apology. Because I understand that, we get numerous apologies when we go out and we speak at events, and we accept those apologies because we understand that at the end of the day, you were fed a false story, and so, you was misled, and we can't hold that against you. We have to accept, what happened to you also, so.
Yeah, we're not mad at the public because in '89 there was such a media frenzy. If you lived in New York, actually it was worldwide, but if you lived in New York, you would see what kind of frenzy it was. And at the time, people really didn't use logic. If we just took a step back and say there are too many inconsistencies in this case, it doesn't make sense. But they didn't do that. But we don't blame anybody. We don't blame the public.
One thing that concerned me was that a year ago, Mayor Bloomberg, who many people are talking about the sugary sodas, but other things, he supported the idea of what it's legally been called a stop and frisk, which was really a stop on site policy in Brooklyn, stopping people not because they've committed a crime, not because they have a weapon, because they're black or brown and walking on the street. And my sense is that what do you say to a young person now who experienced what happened and what happened to you? Can you tell them, all right, brother, hang on, justice will prevail? When they're 14, 15, 16, they may be in jail for decades and no one knows that they're innocent.
Yeah, the first thing that we always do is we talk to the parents because we know that the parents is that first line. When that kid comes, when he grows up, that's the first role model that you come across. And we always tell the parents, to know your rights as a parent, and to be able to tell the kid what to do, no police policy, no police procedure. Be the first person to tell a kid, what to do when he stopped. Because Central Park 5 led to stop and frisk. Stop and frisk led to Trayvon Martin, and numerous other cases. And by us, telling the parents that then we ask the parents to use our story as an example, that positive reinforcement of what can happen to a kid who doesn't know his rights. Because we're not the only case. You know, it happens all the time. In Chicago, you have the Inglewood 4, you know. And so, you know, this is a situation that we always encourage the parents.
And there's another aspect to this, too, which is they turned on the videotape cameras after 30 hours. And even Ray Kelly, who's the current commissioner of police in the city of New York, has suggested that, you know, maybe you should be turning on the cameras the second the interrogation begins. And just think what would have happened if that jury, that lone jury member holding out at those inconsistencies and wanting to go home as they all wanted to go home and capitulating, made up some cockamamie story to get out of there. What if they were all privileged to the good cop, bad cop, to the lying, to the deceit, to the, we know you didn't do it, you're a good kid, Raymond, but there's this other guy, Kevin, who's saying you did it, and he's saying, I don't know who Kevin is. And all of a sudden, it's a circular firing squad. What if the jury could see all of that? We still want, apparently, we want our police to have the power to lie and to suggest and coax things out if they're guilty. But we also want to be able to build into the system the ability for the jury of the peers to see the manipulation and understand the consistencies. And, you know, Youssef's attorney was a divorce lawyer. With the exception of Michael Joseph, who was a court-assigned lawyer, Antron had the only really effective legal representation, and even he could not climb the mountain against the sort of the overwhelming public sentiment that they had to be guilty, even though all these inconsistencies existed because they confessed and because the police and the prosecutors said it was so.
A question from over here? Yep.
Thank you. My name is Martha Hodes. I'm a New Yorker, and I was in New York at the time, and I just want to express my gratitude to everybody up there, gentlemen. It's really, I can't find words to express seeing you here. I'm a historian of race and sexuality, and for me this case is, and was at the time as well, all about race and sexuality. And it was in the film, absolutely in the film. For me as a scholar of that, of those kinds of issues, it was somewhat understated, but maybe for that reason more powerful. So my question is, for you gentlemen, at the time, did people talk about this? This was a white woman, you're men of color, this is what it's going to be about. Was that something that was discussed? Was it said? And then my question for the filmmaker or all of you, now do white people want to talk about this? Are they willing to say this? Are they willing to say that's what this case was about?
I know for us, because we was, you know, for me, I spent 17 months in the juvenile facility, and it wasn't talked about in that aspect of a political aspect or even a historic aspect. It was mostly just about you're guilty. A lot of people assumed that we were guilty, and so you didn't get a lot of let me talk to you, you know, let me rub your shoulders and make sure you're all right. You didn't get a lot of that. You got mostly like, oh, you're Raymond Santana, stay over there, please. You know, and you know, that's something that Kevin spoke about earlier. Like, we felt like we was alone. You know, so even if there was some type of rehabilitation in here somewhere, we wasn't gonna get that. It wasn't about that for us. It was just about punishment.
You know, I think that's a really excellent question, and it felt like it opened the door on the editing process for us, because we did make a decision to sort of consciously understate that for the purposes of not sort of adding overlays of sort of interpretation and other contexts that may not have actually been as operative as we think, you know. But it's very complicated because it's resonating off those historical and political contexts, and yet in the end it may be what Dwyer said. They got stuck in a mistake, and we've all in this room made a mistake, and we all know probably in this room what it's like to hang on to that mistake, and rather than tell the truth, hang on a little bit longer. And we know the discomfort and the internal turmoil that causes, as well as its external damages. And I think that, of course, it's about race, you know, and of course this was a moment in which race trumped rape in a way, because this was a rape case, and if they'd followed the clues of the rape case, they perhaps would have come to an earlier conclusion. They might have gotten and connected Reyes to this event, but they didn't, because one might assume, and this is why we wanted to tread lightly about this. as Saul Kassin, the social psychologist, says in the film, it's not unreasonable to think, he says, that these guys might have done it the night of the thing. You've got all these reports coming out of the central part of Central Park of this gang of kids that are hassling bicyclists and doing this and hassling joggers and have beat up somebody seriously enough to be a felony. And then you've rounded up a few kids, not just Kevin and Raymond, but you've rounded up a lot of other kids, and you eventually go out over the next day or so and you bring in other kids, including Corey and Yusef and Antron. And because they are innocent and from good families and never been in the system before, are trying to be cooperative, they're in the most trouble. They're in the most jeopardy. And the cops begin to work on them. And all of a sudden, it's not so much race and sexuality. It's informed, of course, historically by all of the things of Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation, white women and black men. But it's also then becomes, we can make these guys for it. That's a different sort of thing. When Jim Dwyer says they're in the lanes high-fiving each other, they're not going, we got a bunch of black guys. They're just happy that they're now going to have another notch on their gun. They've got another thing that they've done. The thing where race comes in for me is where they realize somewhere along the line, every single one of them, that they made a mistake. And each one of them said, somewhere, it doesn't matter. They're just a bunch of black kids. That's what happened. That's what happened. And they would rather let these guys rot in jail than to say, you know what, I screwed up. I think Captain, I think Commissioner, I think Mr. Mayor, we got to open this thing up again. This stinks. I'm upset. Nobody did that because it's just a bunch of black guys.